Hey folks, how you doing? This is Tim Black. Welcome to a special edition of the Tim Black Show. Now, in honor of Black History Month, we've been bringing together some great guests, a group of outstanding, influential, and inspiring Black women. To start off our series, I have none other than a public relations guru, the PR whisperer herself, author Jennifer R. Farmer. Jennifer, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, it's a pleasure to have you. Folks, Jennifer just released a book, I think it comes out tomorrow, entitled First and Only, A Black Woman's Guide to Surviving at Work and Life. Wow. Jennifer, first of all, I've started to read your book. I got a couple things highlighted that really spoke to me. Why the title First and Only?
I wrote the title First and Only because a lot of times Black women find themselves in leadership positions where they are the only or they are the first in their family and their community. And I wanted to speak to that dynamic specifically and head on. I also wanted to dedicate this book specifically to Black women. There are a ton of leadership books on the market, and many of them do not speak to what Black women experience at work and in life. And when we read these books, we often have to try to find ourselves or find pieces of ourselves. And I wanted to say, no, I'm writing something specifically for Black women. You don't have to question whether or not you are the intended audience. You are the people who I had in mind when I started writing.
I'm so excited about this. I want to first of all say I love that idea. It's an idea. One of the notes I made here, Jennifer, on this point is that when I was in corporate America, I read all these self-help books.
Yes.
And wrongly, as a kid growing up, I'm thinking, okay, think positive, Tim Black, have your head right, be responsible. One of my favorite books was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. You may have heard of it.
Yes.
And I'm applying all this stuff, and I'm like, why am I not getting the same results?
Yes.
Why are my results not right? And then I realized, oh, that's right, I'm a Black guy. And look, and it's funny, but the truth is, a lot of anxiety, frustration, depression, anger, bad things that happen in your relationships, all because you don't really understand that those books aren't written for us. They're written for other people who deal with different issues. Am I on the right track with that, Jennifer?
You're absolutely on the right track. And here's the thing. I am someone who loves self-help books. I love leadership books. And so just like you said, I would consume that content and think, okay, I'm ready to take on the world. I remember reading Jeffrey Fox's How to Become CEO in my 20s. And I read that book. And when I closed the book, I said, okay, now I'm going to be CEO. And do you know the first time I was CEO? When I started my own PR business. And so, I had to make myself CEO. And what I found is that, a lot of the books, there are things and there are gems that you can glean from them. But for Black women, a lot of those books don't speak to the tone policing, the questions about our hair, the questions about our leadership style, the questions about, what we bring to the table. A lot of those books don't speak to that because they were not written from a Black woman's perspective. And the books also don't account for the impact of systemic racism and how that can slow us down, or the intersecting oppressions that Black women experience. So you're absolutely on the right track.
Yeah, I definitely see your point of view on this. And I'll tell you, I made a couple of notes to the book that I wanted people to get. So full disclaimer, I want you to know, Jennifer, I think that we could spend 3 hours on this book. Okay. I know I don't have you for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But I said, so this is the way I see it. I want this video to be empowering for my Black women audience. I want them to watch it, learn something, get a new resource that they can use in their toolbox and how to deal with life. That's my first audience. And my second audience are people that need to understand what Black women are dealing with. My non-Black women, they need to understand that when Black women say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, I need them to respect that.
Absolutely.
Understand it, and not just on a theoretical level, but on an emotional level, and reality, to say, okay, this is not just her emotions. This is what she's actually going through, right? So I hope that we can
unpack that
perspective in this conversation.
Sure.
The first thing that I saw Page 19, you say, that's from the chapter, Why Center Black Women, What Black Women Face. You talk about cultural appropriation, but you talk about it in a way that I have to correct a lot of my white viewers. You say, why write a book for Black women specifically? And you go into why. You just spoke on it, but could you hit it a little harder as far as the cultural appropriation of Blackness and of Black women?
Okay, so I wrote specifically for Black women and not women of color because a lot of times we try to lump everyone in the same category. And a lot of times we do not want to talk, or society does not want to talk about the ways in which women of color can perpetuate harm towards Black women. And I've seen it happen time and time again. And when you lump Black women and women of color into one category, you erase the uniqueness of each group. But you also ignore the fact that for a lot of women of color, they have anti-Blackness embedded within them, and that has to be unlearned. And if a person is not doing their own anti-racism work in an intentional way and in an ongoing way, even though they may face the marginalizing oppression of being a woman and of being a non-white woman, they can still perpetuate harm. And so we find it is so irritating, and it is also painful for me when we see pop stars and we see entertainers. Gina Rodriguez comes to mind, and they are so anti-Black that they cannot hide it. Or when you have conversations around colorism, and non-Black women and sometimes Black women perpetuate that light is better, and that can be harmful. The other thing is when Black women survey pop culture, when they survey the media in terms of who is sharing the news, who's in the boardroom, very often you don't see people who are medium brown or darker skin. And so I wanted to address all of those and hold all of that together. And that's why I specifically targeted Black women. I should also say that there's work on the market for women of color. Minda Harts wrote a phenomenal book called The Memo, and I believe it came out in 2019, but she spoke specifically to women of color. We don't need another book, in my opinion, to women of color. We need more Black women offering their expected perspective and sharing what they are experiencing and the ways that they experience harm from so many different avenues.
Yes, folks. And I want to recommend this chapter and this particular point because I've looked at this cultural appropriation. I've heard people give it terms and try to relate it to folks, but the way that Jennifer breaks it down is in a different way. It's how can I say this? So people say, Tim, well, we take your hip hop, for instance, and we take different forms of dance and cultural appropriate. We use that. We love that. We love Black culture. Black culture is great, but you guys take skateboarding and wearing Dockers, or you take that's white guy stuff. But the thing that, and then Jennifer makes this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, the difference is we can't take white people's stuff, make it Black people's stuff, and then extract all of the financial gain from it, put it on the market, and blow up off of it. Like that's in my opinion, that's what white people have been able to do with Black culture. And that's why it's wrong, because they take all of our agency from us. And that's just because of the society that we have that values white people, whiteness over Blackness, or is anti-Black.
Right. And, to dig deeper, specifically where Black women are concerned, for decades, we have been the source of derision, the source of jokes based on our body types, based on how we style our hair. And when you see a non-Black woman wearing her hair in cornrows or and profiting off of that, it's like they're taking a piece of our culture, one which we have been criticized. I mean, it's still a political statement to decide that you are going to wear your hair natural. And even with wearing your hair natural, meaning no chemicals, Black women have to weigh the risk of, is this going to cost me? Where is it going to cost me? Is this environment safe? And so to have those hairstyles show up on non-Black women who have so many other privileges, it can be like a slap in the face, because they take what they want, but they don't experience the pain associated with it. They can also profit from it. And the body type is, the body type is another thing that comes comes to mind. I think about the woman who was in prison, and she was, I believe she was put at a zoo,
Yeah.
and they made fun of her body.
Yes.
And she was there to be a spectacle for folks. And so there's just so much with our bodies that, we fight every day to have agency over our bodies, our decisions. And it's just so interesting to see the way non-Black women pick and choose what they want, even as what they're picking can be very, very costly for us.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you're correcting me, because we need to focus this on women. I'm a guy, so I was like, Tim, how are we going to make sure that that we're talking about women? Because as a guy, you like always want to lean back to, well, it's just Black people issues, but this is specifically about Black women. So Black women have to deal with going to the workplace in their hair, people making comments. Nobody wants to touch a Black guy's hair, at least I don't think. I can't relate to it anyway. But how would a Black woman deal with that in the workplace without, I don't know, being seen as antisocial or
Yeah.
too sensitive or?
Yeah. So, I mean, you make calculated risk, and a lot of times you bite your tongue, because if you speak up at every injustice, that can get hard. And so sometimes you make calculated risk and you decide when you're going to say something. I remember years ago, I think I had a ponytail in my hair, and I was really proud of my hairstyle. And my boss, white man, walked up to me. Actually, we were like in the coffee area, and he walked up and he said, "Is that your hair?" And I kind of looked at him. I gave him a look. And he said, "Well, everyone knows it's not your hair." And I said, "But you're the only person who felt comfortable asking me about it, and asking me about it in public."
Hmm.
And then he went and he told one of my colleagues, "Oh, I think I got in trouble with Jennifer." And the colleague told me, and I said, "Why did he feel comfortable speaking about my hair and then doing it in public?" So it's those kind of things. And there have been other times when I haven't said anything. And then there have been times when I've been very, very vocal. And when you are vocal and when you set boundaries based on how you want to interact with others and how you want them to interact with you, you can be called angry. You can be called too sensitive. "Oh, Jennifer, no one cares about that. You need to relax." And so it's really a web that we have to navigate, and we have to navigate it from situation to situation, because every work environment is different, and you're also working with different people. And so I wrote this book and I shared my perspective. And I think that for every leadership advice that Black women receive, it must be viewed from the lens of race and gender and also privilege. It's like I have to acknowledge my own privilege, and I have to create space for women who feel comfortable going further than what I've said, or who don't feel comfortable going as far. It's like you have to do what is comfortable for you and take a risk that you can live with the consequences. Because I've seen Black women marginalized. I've seen Black women shut out of opportunities, not because of their skill or ability, but because they had and they exercised a certain level of agency.
Absolutely. I've seen it happen as well. And well, I have to admit, there are times I thought, well, is this person being too sensitive? Are they, what's going on? I didn't understand how disrespectful, how they felt disrespected. I mean, I'm not a woman. I'm not walking around in their bodies and understand. But when I got into media, Jennifer, I started learning stuff. I started learning, like, the number one killer of women is men.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, if I was a woman, I wouldn't even want to go out with a guy. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Meeting new people. It's like, I mean, literally being a woman and then being a Black woman meeting people, new people. It's a level of fear that men never really experience. Like, how can you really put yourself in that situation and understand what that's like? I don't know if you discussed that in the book, but
in the book, I talk about the importance of building allies and creating a community and investing in that community so that you're safe. And the allies, it should include, it should include Black men. For me, when I think about some of the professional relationships that I have with Black men, or even my relationship with my brother and, and other friends, it allows me to remain open and to remain willing, and to see the beauty in all people, including, in men, and to draw strength from from those men, especially the ones who are doing their work.
Victimization assertion or victimhood assertions. As a Black woman, I know as a Black man, I hear it all the time. Tim, you want to play the victim. You're looking at it this way. You shouldn't look at it that way, Tim. This is just what happens. These type of, they don't respect the position that you're coming from or the claims that you're making. Why is it not victimhood, but awareness to accept the obstacles that Black women deal with? How do we tell these folks, hey, no, this is not me saying I want to be a victim. This is the reality of what we deal with. How do you assert that and make sure people understand the difference?
Well, whether you agree with my experience, that does not make my experience any less true. So I don't need you to co-sign on my experience. I don't need you to co-sign on my perspective. It's my perspective and it's my experience. And it is truth because it is it's what I'm experiencing. That's one thing. And the other piece of this is, for so long, Black women have held on to so much. When you think about health disparities, when you think about heart disease, when you think about the mortality rate associated with cancer for Black women, that is not just about genetics or physical illness. Racism is connected with that. And when you think about and you hear the strong Black woman trope, that can be, someone told me today, oh, you're so strong. And that can be a compliment. But in certain situations, Black women have just kept going and kept going and kept going, disregarding most of what we hear. I know of several people who've been in sexual harassment situations, myself included, and I didn't say anything. So this is not about wanting to be a victim. In fact, we've been victimized in many, many ways by many, many people, and often you never hear about it. And so it's my perspective, it's my truth, and part of loving myself and part of loving Black women is telling the truth.
I noticed you pointed out several instances of Black women challenges, but unlike some, you avoided indicting Black men like across the board as if they're the primary source of those obstacles. And I thought that was refreshing, but I understand on a conscious level, was that something you decided to do, or was that just kind of organic to the writing process or as you wrote the book?
It's something that I decided to do. I was intentional about that because, a lot of Black women have been hurt by Black men, and I'm also a mother. So to make a blanket generalization about Black men, what does that say about how I feel about my son? What does it say about how I feel about my brother? What does it say about the people who I'm in professional relationship with, which I made a conscious decision to work with them? And so I will not join the bandwagon for political purposes or other.
For financial purposes, let's be real, Jennifer.
Or financial purposes.
That's what I mean. If you lean into that, then
I will not join the bandwagon of attacking Black men. I think that there are individual issues, and I speak to those individual issues when they arise. But it does me no good to attack Black men. And then I also think about the men who I know and who I'm in relationship with. And so I'm not on that team at all. And I think that you can love Black women, you can speak the truth about what we experience, and you can do so without maligning our brothers.
Amazing. Like it should be amazing, but it's very, very refreshing to hear that that take. I mean, I'm cognizant of it. Sometimes in my content, I find myself being critical of Black women. Just in political, doing politics, talking about politics. And I say, Tim, are you going too far being this critical of this sister? I mean, I'm still catching hell, Jennifer, to an interview I did 4 years ago with Donna Brazile, because people were so angry with Donna Brazile over like the thing about the elections. And I know I'm not saying I'm not trying to get you good to comment about politics, but I'm just saying people didn't understand what I was dealing with. I got this sister that's been through so much. She came from a poor family, I think like in Alabama. She becomes DNC chair twice. And she's been working in politics for 35 years. And she's worked for presidents. And I got to grill her, I got to grill this woman. And I noticed that my white counterparts had no problem at all,
Yeah.
trying to, go at her hard. And people didn't understand how difficult it was for me
Yeah.
to address her and be like, no, Donna, hold on, Donna. What are you talking about? Like, I could do that to a guy, but to do that to a sister, and a sister that's an older sister, a couple years older, and a matriarch,
Yeah.
they didn't understand at all what I was going through. But I think you understand it, Jennifer.
I mean, I didn't see that interview, but I know that when she was going through that, my heart felt for her on a personal level based on her being a human being. And I thought about how I would feel. I even suggested to people who I know who knew her, reach out to her and see if she's okay. Because at the end of the day, we're human beings. And sometimes what I remind myself, because social media it can be great and it can also be toxic, is I remind myself of I think there are class differences between the number of people who spend a lot of time on social media and people who are offline just trying to make it. And I try to remind myself that sometimes what we see on social media is not indicative of what an entire group thinks. And so I try to think about the people in my family and the people in my network who, again, are just grinding it out day after day. And they just want to know that they're going to be safe. They can take care of their family, keep a roof over their head. They're not thinking about these things the way social media scholars are. Or people who spend a lot
Yeah.
of time. And I just try to keep that, to keep it front and center.
Or who make their living off of clicks and views and
Right.
what have you. Exactly.
Yeah.
I want people to know that, like on page 4, Jennifer says, this book is not about how to get or keep a job. It's about how to heal yourself so you can sustain yourself. What made you write that book? What made you choose this angle, Jennifer, of consciousness for folks?
Okay. Because, if you think about systemic racism in the United States, there are a lot of people who are told you're not good enough. A lot of Black women who are told you're not good enough. You can't do this job. And it's not necessarily about their ability, but the systems in which they're operating. And so I think we have to acknowledge that even when you find someone and they've accomplished a lot, how much more could they accomplish without racism, without sexism? And so I want to acknowledge that. And I also think that we are multi-dimensional people, and we have to speak to the whole person. I chose to speak to the spiritual aspects of a person, the professional and the personal. So that's that. And then the final part of it is, most Black people have experienced some sort of trauma. I think 70%, I read a statistic that says 70% of Black people have experienced some type of trauma. And then when you think about Black women, we've also experienced a ton of trauma. And sometimes it starts at a very, very young age. And so we can be going through life and we could have things that we have not even addressed that came up in childhood. And so I think it is important as we do our work to constantly think about and to check in with ourselves and say, are you well? And if there are areas where you are not well, to to attend to those areas through therapy or through counseling. I read a phenomenal book by Sabrina, I believe her name is Sabrina Gandhi, and it's called Sacred Pampering Principles for African American women. And it's a phenomenal book because she gives concrete ways that Black women can support ourselves. But then she looks at a host of common ailments that we experience, and she traces that back to a non-health issue. And so she talks a lot about fibroids, and she talks a lot about how that could result from being wounded in certain ways, and wounded by men, in fact, is what she says. And so I think that it's very, very important that we and unresolved wounds, I should say unresolved wounds or unhealed wounds. Okay. So I think it's very, very important that even as we speak to a person's professional success, that we acknowledge that the spirit must be tended to as well.
Perfect segue. Chapter 2, Why Center Black Woman? You talk about Gabrielle Union, and as successful as she is, as amazing as she is, as accomplished as she is, they still treated her like Angry black woman because she had a couple of issues on the set of American Idol. Um, as I read it, as I read your entry of it, I didn't know that was, that she complained about Simon Cowell smoking in his office, for instance. Like her complaining about something that most people will complain about, smoking indoors where we got to work. That wouldn't seem like a very general, very basic request. But since it was a black woman, Gabrielle Union, doing it, that coupled with maybe another complaint with, I forget what the other thing was. Even a powerful woman like Gabrielle Union was pushed off her show.
Right.
Um,
And
how I
that
don't know how you deal with that type of marginalization.
Yeah, and that resonated with me. And one of the reasons it resonated is because when you are the first or you are the only, when you've achieved a level of success, people outside of you, people who are not close to you, it can be easy for them to think that your life is problem free, that you have no issues. And so even finding a space to say all is not well, that can be difficult because if people have not walked where you've walked, it can be hard to relate to, yep, I have this great job and I still have challenges. So what she experienced, it really resonated with me. The other thing is, Black women are among the most educated groups in the nation. And even with all the education and all the work that we've done on ourselves, we can still be cast aside or marginalized. And when it comes to Gabrielle Union, I consider her America's sweetheart. When I think about America's sweetheart, I think of Gabrielle Union. And when she voiced a concern, I won't even call it a complaint, when she voiced a concern about someone else doing something that could be harmful to her health, when she spoke up for women on set and women in the series who didn't have as much power, she was pushed out. And that is it's wrong. And if it can happen to her, it can happen to other Black women. Not only can, it is happening. And so a lot of times we have to make these calculated risks of, do we say something? Do we keep quiet? When do we say something? To whom do we say something? It's all kinds of mental acrobats that we have to go to just to survive, just to thrive. And my heart went out to her. They even made comments about her hair in terms of how she was styling, her hair. They weren't okay with that. So it's just like you're damned if you do, and you're damned. I guess if you just sit there and don't be quiet, you're okay until they get tired of you, until they decide they want someone else.
Absolutely. And in fact, folks, Jennifer also noted that another person on the show, another judge, Julian Hugh, a white lady, they were chastising her about her wardrobe choices, for instance, and
Yeah.
the way that she dressed as well. And so it's sort of like what I tell folks about the police in politics. I tell them, I said, well, I'm not saying that white people don't get beat up by the police. I'm not saying, I'm saying that Black people get beat up more. And I'm not saying that white women don't deal with sexism, but Black women deal with sexism and racism. Like, so they're even more, they're getting it from different angles.
Yeah.
And I think that's clearly stated in the book. And there's certain things that Jennifer's suggesting you do in order to take care of yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Gosh, I don't know. Is there, okay, so an ally. Let me stop looking at my notes. An ally, a person who loves Black women. I got a Black mom, I got a Black wife, I got a Black daughter. Okay, and Black granddaughter now. How can I best support the Black women in my life to have their backs and to support their journey while being cognizant of all these things that you've listed in your book?
Well, the first thing that you can do is to continue doing your own work, continue working on yourself and doing your own work. The next thing that you can do is to ask the Black women in your life, what does it look like for me to support you? What do you need from me? Sometimes we will give people what we need versus what they need. And so asking, how can I support you? What can be helpful? Reading as much as you can from different perspectives and different authors, that is helpful. And then the other thing is, don't have your allies out there on their own. When you see an ally and they're being attacked, particularly on social media, say something, say something, come to their defense. And I love these people who reach out privately but they won't say anything publicly. Don't be that person. If it's someone who you believe in, someone whose character you've observed over time, or just someone who you feel is getting a raw deal, reach out to them and let them know that that you support them, and ask them what they need in that moment. When I think about the best allies that I've had or that I have, I think about people who are, one, doing conscious work outside of their relationship with me, and two, someone who commits to see. They want to see, they're looking to find out, okay, well, what is it like to be her? What is she going through? How can I support her? They commit to see, and they can commit to act, and they commit to speak. When they see something that's not right, they commit to say something. And they never get to the point where they feel like all my work is done, and so I think that that it's important for allies to know that if you're not walking that person's experience, your work, understanding them and supporting them, it's lifelong work.
The second point you made about helping people, ask these women, how can you help?
Yeah.
Like that's gold right there, Jennifer. You had me at that because because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is a guy. I'm like, let me fix this. And I'm like doing stuff. And my wife's like, and I'm like, wonder why things are not, why she's not overjoyed. Sometimes she don't even want me to do anything.
Absolutely. Sometimes when people are in a bad place or they're struggling, what they want is for you to be present. That means that you're not sitting there spouting out a bunch of solutions that you might try, but they want you to be present with them. And being present is sitting with discomfort.
Yeah. And dealing with the inadequacy of, because you get, as a guy, I get joy, and it feeds my ego to help. You know what I'm saying? I get gratification from being a good partner. And sometimes that means go make dinner, not solve her trouble. You know what I'm saying? Or what's on her mind, because she's got all these things going on at one time.
Definitely.
Folks, just so you know, Jennifer Farmer is kind of the bomb. Like, she's the okay. So a couple of her clients are Nina Turner, as we all know, who wrote the foreword for this amazing book.
Yes.
Another one of her clients came on the show. He's the one and only Killer Mike. Yeah. And she has her own PR agency, and she's very accomplished. So you're listening to someone in this book who's walked the walk and talked the talk and lived the life and is still doing it. Got her own company and very successful in her own right. Jennifer, so for young women just getting their legs under them, just starting out, and they're looking at this landscape, we got pandemic, it's hard to keep a job. Hell, it's hard to get a job, keep a job. Man, what would be your advice to them as they go into this problematic situation, this workforce, being Black and just trying to get a job, just trying to, I don't know, what can you tell them?
So I would say trust yourself. I spent many years in the first part of my career not trusting myself. And I would say if you can acquire confidence at an early age, that will help you, because it will help you make decisions without seeking permission from other people. So trust yourself is really important. Network to the extent that you can in this environment. And for someone who's just starting out, it could be asking the people who you know, who do you think I should know? Who do you think I should talk to? It could be asking a former professor. It could be asking a family friend. It could be reaching out and cold calling someone and just saying, are there any tips that you can share? Now, the caveat about networking is not the only thing that you have to do, because you can only go as far as your network or the person with whom you're networking. And so there's a whole section of the book about that. But you can at least start by asking the people who you know, even if it's just a handful of people. Are you hiring? Do you know anyone who's hiring? Where can I go? Would you be willing to do an introduction? When I got my first job, I had my son right after my senior year, or right before I graduated college. And I was young, I was very, very scared. And I remember I had a mentor who I met in high school. I met him in high school, and he was running for judge, and I worked on his campaign when I was in high school. And when I went to college, he would call me from time to time to make sure I was okay. And so when I knew that I was going to have a baby, I called him and I said, Judge Green, shout out to Judge Green. I said, Judge Green, I'm having a baby and I graduate and I don't know what to do. And he said, okay, well, have you applied at this place? And I remember he said, go to McDonald's and apply at McDonald's. And I said, I'm not working at McDonald's. I just got this degree. And he said, Jennifer, we can work on something else long term, but you need to have money coming in. And so I stayed on him so much that he called. And at the time, he was a Republican and I was a Democrat. And even though I was young, I had already volunteered on Democratic campaigns. But he called one of his friends who was the clerk of court in Franklin County at that time, and he was a Republican, and asked the guy to interview me. And so the guy interviews me. And when he finds out I'm a Democrat, he says, we don't have any jobs. And so I told Judge Green, no, he said he didn't have any jobs. And Judge Green kind of said, really? And he said, no, he's got jobs. So he calls the guy back and said, look, she is a hard worker. She's honest. She needs the experience. And I'm asking you to give her another look. And the guy hired me. I would not have gotten that job on my own. I didn't know who to ask. And it was leaning into a network that I had started when I was in college. And so that was really helpful. And so, I guess to sum it up, I would say, trust yourself. Don't be afraid to cold call, ask the people in your network who you should know, and then think very carefully about what brings you joy. And if you think about what brings you joy, that could signal the areas that you may excel in. And so since I was 11, Tim, I don't know if you'll believe this, but since I was 11, I wanted to be a writer. And yeah, since I was 11 years old. And I really didn't take it seriously until I was working in the Ohio Senate. And my boss would always say, he was former mayor of Cincinnati, but at that time he was a state senator, Mark Mallory. And he would always say, you're a great writer. And based on his feedback, that's how I ended up going into communications, because he would always say, you're a great writer, you communicate well. And so I said, okay, no one's ever told me that. Maybe I should try it. So trust yourself, discover what you like to do, because that could have a hint towards what could make you very successful and very happy.
What an amazing story. And great on you. Like, another point should be, don't get pissed off when you don't get the answers you want.
Yeah.
Somebody told me go work at McDonald's, I'd be like, dude, how am I take care of family on McDonald's money?
Yeah.
You know? But you stuck with it, and that's you reap the benefits of keeping those communication open, and he, later on he gave you some more information. So I find that young people, sometimes if you don't tell them what they want to hear, they're out of there. They want it this way. People ask me how to get started in doing your own media. Like, well, you just got to put your head down and keep working. And I did 3 shows. I at one point I was doing 2 shows a day.
Wow.
Because I figured, if I could do 2 shows a day for 90 days, I would have a year's worth of experience in 90 days. Because most people do a show a week.
Yes.
So that's the way I looked at it, right? And people don't want to hear that, because they think it's a shortcut. They're like, no, it's got to be something else you did. Like, didn't you, get a hookup? Like,
The other thing that I tell people is it's hard work. I mean, most people could not work the way that I work, and I'm not glorifying overwork. But what I'm saying is it is hard work, and it's hard work. So sometimes it's very, very hard work. And I try to remind myself that sometimes you are in seasons where you have to work harder than you might have to work in another season.
Are there support groups that Black women belong to? Do you belong to any support groups or community groups that keep you motivated? Because even the great Jennifer Farmer has to have those moments. It's like,
yeah. So I have a wonderful coach, Juanita Roberson. And if I even think that I'm getting down or I need to bounce something off, I text her and she makes herself available. So she's wonderful. 2 of my college roommates, we still get together and we pray once a month. And we talk about what's going on in each other's lives. And, and we pray. I have other friends who I've known for years, Teresa Todd, Amanda Hoyt, and I am very honest and vulnerable with them. And we talk about everything. And I ask them for their advice. They don't have to be in my field, but they have so much wisdom and experience, and they know me very well. So I am very, very comfortable going to my friends and being vulnerable and asking questions. What do you think of this? And this is what I'm dealing with. How would you respond? And I think that willingness to be vulnerable, you can't get help unless you tell people, the right people, I need help or I'm struggling in this area.
That's good advice. It's advice I should have taken. When I was younger, some of my associations weren't too positive. So I kind of cut everybody off and was like, I'm about to go alone. It was me and my wife. And it became a thing where I would just be me against the world.
Yeah.
Always the best way to be. Like, because you need advice. You need someone to bounce ideas off. And I got a couple friends like my brothers that are really close, but you're right. And to me, it's like hard to find good people to network with, like in that way that you're describing, that they have your best interests at heart. They want the same things for themselves as they want for you.
Yeah.
And some people want to see you succeed, but not as much as them now. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, I should say like these women, Amanda and Teresa, I've known them for probably 21 years. So it's not something that started yesterday. I've known them for years. And my college roommates, that was over 20 years ago. So these are people who I've been in relationship with for a long time.
Exactly. There's no shortcuts to building a relationship. Jennifer Farmer, thank you so much for taking time out. Tell people where to get the book. Guys, get the book. Jennifer, where can I get the book?
Okay, so you can get the book at any bookseller. So that's Target, that's Barnes and Noble, that's Walmart, any place that sells books, you can get the book. You can order it from the publisher, Broadleaf Books. It does drop on February 9th. So any point after that, you're welcome to. Actually, you can pre-order now. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PR_whisperer.
PR_whisperer. That's one of the greatest Twitter handles. PR Whisperer. That's it, guys.
Yeah.
Go do it. First and only, A Black Woman's Guide to Thriving at Work and Life. Thank you for spending some time with us, Jennifer. Amazing book.
Thank you.
I think it's helpful for men and women,
Absolutely.
Black men and women, but definitely for Black women. I'm still learning from it, so hey, sue me. Great stuff. I'll share it with my wife, and I appreciate the copy.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on.
You got it, sis.
Okay.
And then I will cut it. Let me ask you something. Do they know us? When I say they, I mean the talking heads on cable news. Do they know you? They talk about the world as if it's a sport. They play political games, report on our pain, rack our brain to feed the stock exchange, but do they know us? Do they know what we care about? Nope. They're too far away. They can't see us. They can't feel us. They can't relate to us. See, when you want to know what's going on in your world, trust someone who lives in your world. Subscribe.